Hey everyone. We just wrapped up our mini-series on the book The Feather Thief and are getting back to our regular format where we discuss a different bird each week. This week we are talking about the Harlequin Duck, a duck that is frequently seen in either the northwest or northeastern part of North America, and usually in rough waters. They're one of the most beautiful and colorful duck that you'll ever see, although Amanda will tell you otherwise. It's your hosts John Bates, Shannon Hackett, Amanda Marquart, and myself, RJ Pohl, for Birds of a Feather Talk Together. Okay, go grab your binoculars and let's get into it. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. This week we're discussing the Harlequin Duck, and I can't remember if we discussed this at all, if it was just before we started recording or if it was during one of our last times, but Amanda and I went up to look for a Harlequin Duck up on like the Illinois-Wisconsin border 2 weekends ago. And we got like an email from our birding group, and I'd heard people talk about Harlequin Ducks. I think Jason, when he was on with us, actually talked about seeing them, but hadn't really seen a picture until we got the email from like our birding group and just really how like cool they look. So we were super excited to go up. And it was super choppy on the water, which, you know, we keep hearing is kind of what they like almost. But there were two people in our group that saw them with a scope, and it kind of like tucked away, and Amanda and I didn't really get to see it. So that was kind of a bummer. But
the ways of chasing rarities. There you go.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
By your own commitment.
Yeah.
But now you've got a story.
You're right. Yeah.
Maybe not the one you want. But...
Yeah. And apparently it's been there since December, so I think we'll try to go up another weekend and see if it's still there.
Yeah.
But we were kind of just curious, and we probably could ask somebody at our group, but when we looked like at their distribution, it's like they're all, you know, up in the Northeast and the Northwest, and you know, why would one be in Lake Michigan? I mean, is that a common thing that they're here sometimes, or is that super rare?
So the general pattern, they're not common by any stretch of the imagination, but it does seem like the number of sightings is slowly going up. And I think one of the interesting things is where are these things coming from, given the breeding distribution sort of along the eastern coast and then in the west. And I don't know that we know where the birds in Illinois come from.
We need to get some feathers. The populations are differentiated.
So you could tell if one is from the east or the west?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we have at least one or two specimens of birds that have been found along Lake Michigan through the years.
Okay.
So we would have some tissue, but it's an interesting thing about where they would come from, because the birds along the East Coast are breeding pretty close to the Atlantic Ocean for the most part. They're not hugely far inland on the rivers that they breed on. And so they would have no trouble moving to the Atlantic coast. So I'm fascinated by thinking about this as to how these birds in the Chicago region, you know, are they coming they actually, one possibility is they do breed on the western side or the eastern side of the Rockies. And so that may be actually where that population is coming from.
Oh, okay. In the past, have they ever been spotted in like groups? I know this year has just been an individual. Do you know that, or?
You know, they always describe them as in the non-breeding season being in flocks in the places that they normally winter. And for me, that it's a bird where I've only ever seen one or two individuals at a time. Okay. I've never seen a flock of Harlequin ducks, and
I'd be shocked if there were flocks. I mean, those birds, at least the way we would look at them, are vagrants, and you don't usually get a whole flock of vagrants, things that are pretty far outside of their distributional ranges. So, you know, is it like limpkins? We don't. Right. Is it going to be a repeated thing? Although I think I don't think there were that many sightings of limpkins this year, were there? You should ask Marky. She has a paper on that.
That's, you know, but I'd say a lot of it depends on exactly what you're talking about, which is, do these individuals get back to their breeding grounds, and do they actually successfully breed? And it's possible that with increasing population levels so let's say I'm right, which I'm not sure I am, that they're coming from the east side of the Rockies in Canada. If that population is doing better, they may just be sending off a few individuals that reach the Illinois region. But it's also possible that those birds survive along the Great Lakes in the winter and get back to the eastern slopes of the Rockies to breed. So
I don't think they're ever going to be breeding here. They would have to change everything about their natural history that we know about to actually breed here. I guess that's not impossible.
Not talking about them breeding here, though. I mean,
they breed in really fast-moving, choppy, bumpy water. Lake Michigan, even on a windy day, is not as nearly as violent as the water that they actually breed in. And they go hand in hand with dippers, which are one of my favorite groups of birds in North America. Kind of in those environments where you're only going to see them when you have really fast moving water. So, and this is one of my most favorite scientific names, Histrionicus. I mean, what's hilarious.
Yes. What does that mean, Shannon?
Well, it means histrionic. that has to do with the way they look, right? So they look like
dramatic.
A harlequin, the Italian things that used to have patchwork and went and behaved like crazy outside of the distribution of normal, but in a way that you don't take seriously, right? Someone who goes has too much histrionics. And that's what these birds look like to the people who describe them. And to me, that's really funny.
And they are the males are stunning in their breeding plumage, and because they're put in their own, it's a monotypic genus too. So they don't have close relatives among the diving ducks, which is where they end up falling out in a phylogenetic sense.
We have 113 of them in our collections, but there are no alcoholics. John, did you get a pickle for that scanning project?
That's a good question. I actually think we probably did not. Not that but I'd have to look and see whether there are any in again, that's a bird. There's an example of a problem we have sometimes in collections, whereas if you got a male Harlequin duck, you'd be hard pressed to put it in alcohol as opposed to making a skin out of it, because they're just so spectacular.
I mean, we have skeletons. We have skin skeletons. We have some mounts and we have some eggs, but we do not have a pickled specimen of Harlequin ducks. They're really spectacular. They didn't, the first time I saw them, they don't even seem real. When you look at them, you're like, are you kidding me? What this bird actually looks like?
Amanda thinks wood ducks are cooler.
No.
That's what I was going to say. I do think wood ducks are cooler. And I know, so is a wood duck a dabbling duck? And then a Harlequin duck's a diver?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not related at all.
And March is coming up, so we can put them into
You're as wrong about ducks. You're as wrong about ducks as John is about
woodcocks.
No
woodcock.
No, about puffins.
Oh, yes, about he took a side of puffins that Shannon was.
It's indefensible to think that boring wood duck is better than a Harlequin duck. No way.
Oh my gosh.
I've got to stand up for wood ducks. I don't think they're boring.
Me too.
I like Harlequin ducks more, but
I think
wood ducks are beautiful too.
Wood ducks are so cool. Maybe because we've seen them a lot more. I have a soft spot for them, but I think wood ducks are so cool. And this reminds me of a wood duck, so I'll give it that. But no, I don't think it's cooler than a wood duck.
So I will say that one of the things you guys experienced is I think something that makes this bird really special, and that the sense that where you have to go to see them. So like Shannon's saying, in the breeding season, they're on these fast flowing streams. And then in the non-breeding season, they're out along the ocean. So a lot of times the weather is bad. I think I was telling you guys that there was one that showed up at Wilmette Harbor, and I went out there and the wind was blowing 45 miles an hour or so. And it was just terrible. And I got out there and I didn't see it, and I was leaving. And as I was walking to the car, I saw this younger kid. I think he was actually wearing shorts, which was one of the reasons why I knew something was crazy about it. And I went up and talked to him, and I think he had just gotten there, and we wandered over, and suddenly this other guy appeared, and he'd been there the whole time, I guess, that I was there, and I hadn't seen him. And he said, "Oh yeah, they're there." And there was two female plumage birds going in and out of the area along the jetty there at the harbor at Gilson Park.
Yeah.
And sometimes you couldn't see them. So they were literally going behind the metal pylons that are there and could get into areas where I guess they were foraging successfully. So you wouldn't even know they were there. And so they're wood ducks can be hard to see too, but these guys are really kind of special that way, because you're going to have to brave the elements a lot of times to see them.
Yeah. What is it about the extreme water? It's like raging rivers or like super choppy water. It's like no matter where they go.
Yeah, why do they seek that out?
So I would question.
It's a habitat. There's not too much stuff in, so if they can make it, they'll get adapted to it.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
There's several other species of ducks. One is torrent duck in South America that's lives entirely along rushing streams too. And then there's another species in New Zealand that's fairly limited to streams and things. So it's like Shannon's saying. I mean, its only competitor is dipper, which is just kind of amazing to me. That I had never thought that I would never even said dipper had a competitor.
Well, I mean, they eat insects. The ducks eat the insects in that water too. So
for sure.
You need to listen to a Harlequin duck too, because they don't sound ducky at all.
I was thinking that's where Histrionicus came from.
Does it sound really dramatic?
No, one of their local names is sea mice. They squeak.
Oh.
They don't. They don't go quack. There's no quacking from Harlequin duck.
That's crazy.
Here, maybe I can play it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether that squeak sounded to somebody like histrionics, but maybe it didn't.
I don't think so. They don't get to the histrionic phase. They look histrionic.
I'm going to attempt to play it and see if this works.
Sounds histrionic to me.
No, it doesn't. It's super wimpy. That's a duck. It's not a duck. It's a duck with a cold.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
like
a duck.
Histrionic duck.
So RJ had read that because of the harsh environments they're in, like they break a lot of bones.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before. Have you heard
really?
that before, John?
No.
Oh, RJ, tell them what you read.
Yeah, I saw there was a note on just saying that of all birds, I think that they have the most broken bones. They suffer more broken bones than any other species. And then it says, in x-rays and museum specimens have determined that most adults live with multiple healed fractures.
Wow.
So you guys haven't heard that or come across that?
No, and the that I'm wondering about is I wonder whether anybody's ever looked at dippers and torrent ducks in that way, because when you watch these birds in these really rocky streams, I guess I can imagine you could get blasted into the rocks on a regular basis. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think it's wanted to to look up what kind of research had been done on them. And the research mainly started in 1990 when the Canadians made the East Coast populations endangered. And so that spawned a whole bunch of research funded in Canada, which I find interesting too, where they put trackers on them and to know where they go, because they don't know where they go. You think something that looks like that, you'd know a lot more, but they didn't back then, and now they do know a lot more.
So I wanted to point out another thing about those broken bones when that came up that I was thinking about, which is that in the breeding season, they probably don't have to fly very much. And maybe you can break a bone and it's not the end of the world in terms of you moving around your local environment long enough that it actually has time to heal, which is just crazy to think about. But I would say any bird that's actually spending a lot of time flying around a territory, for instance, in the breeding season, is basically going to be dead if it's got a broken bone of some kind.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe they're fast healers. Part of their adaptive nature is that they somehow sped up the bone healing process or tamped down their pain. They don't feel pain in the same way. I don't know. So in looking into the science, I wanted to see if these populations were distinct from each other, but it turns out they're not morphologically distinct, but they are with unpublished microsatellite data. So these are the same markers that humans have used historically to diagnose individuals so that you can figure out who committed a crime, whose DNA was under the fingernails of a murder victim, for example. And those markers were used, but it's unpublished, to show that even though there's morphological variation, but no differentiation, but there is genetic differentiation. So those markers that can make that can track individuals actually show that there are genetically distinct populations in the east and the west of this bird. So that means, I think, that we could really start tracking where these vagrant records. John, did you look at I wanted to say eBay, but did you look at eBird to see, are there more and more sightings over the last 20 years? What are they expanding, or is it just vagrants?
I haven't looked at that. That would be interesting. I mean, there's a specific place where eBird can be a little bit hard to look at. So, for instance, that bird that you guys were looking for and didn't see would be an example of when you went to eBird, there would be an awful lot of sightings of that same individual over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also one of these birds that when it gets along the coast of Lake Michigan, you can begin to use eBird to actually see where single individuals are moving up and down the lakefront looking for probably better places to feed than others. And so, yeah, it would be interesting to look at the eBird records, with the caveat being that I think there might be some issues with try to decide how many birds are actually involved in that part of the world. I mean, I was interested in some of the comments that I read about where putting transmitters on them was a real challenge because some of the traditional methods for attaching them with harnesses didn't work because the birds the way the birds were in the rushing water and things, it was causing problems for them to actually move around with them. So they've had some trouble figuring out the best ways. I think they had actually figured out some implants that they could use that seemed to be the safest way to actually get reasonable data from a bird that was moving around.
They also pair on the wintering grounds, which I think is pretty interesting too. So that's not necessarily uncommon, but not all that common. And then I have some other fun facts, things I didn't know. There's a lot of hybridization among species and even genera, even subfamilies of ducks. And but this part of the duck tree of life, which has mergansers in it, they don't hybridize. that Mergini tribe.
That's actually not true, and I can show a picture.
They say it's really rare there.
I think it is. There was a hybrid common goldeneye hooded merganser.
Yeah,
fair, on the Chicago
but
for a number of years.
It's still, there are tons of hybrid in the other parts of the duck tree of life.
For sure.
Tons and tons and tons. So I'm curious, when that happens, I'm like, okay, well, what is it? Prezygotic isolating mechanisms, postzygotic isolating mechanisms, behavioral mechanisms that keep them from, maybe it's also where they're found. They don't overlap with a lot of other things, but
yeah. I mean, I was looking at Harlequin duck in terms of nest sites, because some of these diving ducks, like goldeneyes, are cavity nesters, which is what wood ducks do. But Harlequin ducks are, I mean, I guess there's some variation. So they've been found in like fallen over tree roots on the edge of a stream up fairly high, but they can also be on the ground, and so they're not doing things the way I would say some of these other diving ducks are. Like hooded mergansers are like wood ducks. They'll nest in trees. So there's some variation there, maybe that they don't overlap very much.
I think they've spent most of their evolutionary history in places where there haven't been people, and not that many people going to those streams, and so they're really tame, which makes them pretty easy to hunt. Apparently, it's one of the things that's contributing to the population declines that they're experiencing. And I've experienced that they're pretty tame. In the Pacific Northwest, at least. So
I'm just wondering, do they taste good?
I don't know.
Are you allowed to hunt them, or is that poaching? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
But there was a time.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean people don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And their fossils in that lineage date back to almost 5 million years old, which I think, and that's
a long time for.
It is, and there's it's in the fossil site is in Lee Creek Mine in North Carolina, and apparently the wings of that skeleton, the bones in the wings of that skeleton, make you think it didn't fly the way the current ones do, according to the thing that I read. But that's a long time. There are lots of other fossils that are way more recent, Pleistocene and earlier. So those are some of my fun facts. And there have been local extirpations of a lot of populations. The distribution used to be broader, so now there's none in Idaho and western Montana. Those populations have gone away.
I'd be interested to know. I have this recollection of just being blown away as a little kid. We made a birding trip in the western U.S. and we were in Yellowstone, and they breed in Yellowstone in Wyoming, and just the idea of suddenly seeing this bird that I had always kind of seen in pictures along the
coast,
the Pacific coast. That suddenly, like, wait, this thing is where?
In Wyoming? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does
look
really exotic.
I was gonna say, as far as like North American ducks, are they really one of the most like colorful? And I mean,
I would put them in a global level as being one of the most.
I would put them at the top. I would say they are the most colorful.
Oh.
What about like a mandarin duck?
Yeah, mandarin ducks.
Yeah, I forget. Okay, fine.
Okay.
I just,
we can put.
Yeah.
What about a wood duck?
The colors are elegant.
Yeah. What about my favorite, the wood duck?
The wood duck.
It's still pretty, but of lesser prettiness.
I,
My sweet wood duck.
There was this restaurant that Amanda and I went to up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and this was before we were into birding, and I think it was called like the Duck Inn or something like that.
Yeah.
But it had all of these just pictures of different ducks all across the walls. And we just like walked around the whole place, kind of like creeping people out because we were standing next to them, looking at all the different ducks, being like, are all these real? Are all these current?
Yeah.
And it's like, that was before we really knew about ducks. And now we want to go back there because now it's like, oh, we've seen this one. We've seen that one.
Yes.
But it just makes me wonder what else is out there that we haven't learned about yet, because we just learned about Harlequin ducks within the past month.
There's no way you're alone in having gone around that restaurant and done that. I would.
Yeah, you're right.
I love that motif. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
They had decoys too. It was so cool.
Yeah.
That's like a work of art.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting kind of close on time here with the Harlequin duck. We do have a mailbag question. Is there anything else on Harlequin duck we wanted to touch on, or should we get into the mailbag?
Yeah, we can go.
People should go to the Pacific Northwest, and I'm showing my Western bias, which is not the first, nor will it be the last time. But you can go to some of those places and see dippers too, and dippers are one of the most adorable birds in all of birds. Oh, cool. Not by what their feathers look like necessarily, but what their behavior is like.
That's a good point. You can't see dippers in the maritime provinces of Canada.
No, because it's better in the West.
We need to do a dipper episode. I remember.
Yeah.
I think John, you sent us a picture of one. I think the last time you both were up north, and I remember like looking it up after that and being like, they're so cool.
Yep, that's one that I always enjoy finding.
All right, so this is from Tim from Massachusetts, and his Instagram handle is baystate_birder. And so Tim wrote, crow roosts. There are 2 massive ones in my area, maybe about 10 miles from my home. How far does a crow or murder go to forage? I see them flying over my house every morning, so right there, more than 10 miles. This might be a 2-part question. Secondly, I live on the East Coast, Massachusetts specifically. So 4 o'clock is when the sun starts to set. The crows are returning to their roosts well before that. So is it beneficial for them to fly miles and miles to find food for a short period of time, especially in winter when they need the most energy? He says he hopes that makes sense. Hope you had a great holiday. Love the podcast. Hope to one day visit the Field Museum.
Well, I'm grateful to him because there's things I didn't know about crows that came out of that question. So I love it when people tell me things that make me look at scientific literature, which this question did. I did not, John, did you know that birds have that crows have these PRAs, pre-roosting aggregations? So yep. I didn't realize that. So what he's seeing is that they get together in smaller groups before they get to the really big roost. They kind of join in smaller groups, and what are they? For me, because crows are so smart, their brains are so developed. Are they just having a happy hour before
the party?
Are they having a little party, getting to know their friends again, asking them how the day was or what they learned for the day?
Information too, so it's absolutely happy hour like. I think that's a really good analogy, and it's a great question where there are some really neat data sets out there, I think, where people have looked at this, but why how do they go that far? And the answer is because it's worth it for them to do it. They wouldn't be doing it otherwise, because as she points out, it's a cold time of year. If there's something really close, that's great, and they don't want to have to go too far. I think another aspect of this is roosts are in places where they actually feel comfortable sleeping at night too. So it may be that the roost site is actually the thing that they're focusing on because that's a safe place for them to be. And then the best foraging grounds just happen to be farther out, and they're going back and forth that way. So I think, it's an interesting aspect of their life history strategy that focuses on both the food and the roosting site.
I mean, at night they have to worry about being cold and getting eaten by an owl. So, so predator avoidance is one of the things you hope you do if you're nested within the center of a roost and not at the edges. But maybe they're just these free roosting aggregations. They're just doing something slightly different because they can.
I suspect there's also a history of people going out with shotguns around roosts when they feel like the crows are bugging them. And so an awful lot of roosts have started to be in towns. And I think one of the reasons for that is they're less likely to get shot at.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And I wonder, maybe they want to take a break if they've gone that far, and they'll roost together again to avoid predators. So you're not roosting in just 2 or 3, you're roosting in a big group, and before you get to the really big group. And maybe that protects them from predators too. So I don't know.
Crows are so smart.
They are. Corvids are the best. Remember, birds of paradise are corvids. So.
Oh, wow.
In that part of the tree of life.
That.
But wood ducks aren't, and they're prettier.
Prettier than birds of paradise? No.
March is coming up.
Better than a blue bird of paradise? Or a 12-wired bird of paradise? Oh, you can't.
It's a matter of opinion.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim, for writing in. We appreciate it, and thanks for listening as well. And hopefully, one day you do visit the Field Museum.
For sure. Always welcome.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. You all are incredible for being a part of this with us, so thank you. Reminder, if you have a question for us, you can reach us at podcast.birdsofafeather@gmail.com. If you're enjoying this, please leave us a review in the podcast app and share this with someone who you think would enjoy it. We're trying to get the reach out there, and we really would appreciate any help that we can get. All right, see you all next week. Love you all.